William, you mentioned more about sexual robotics, and we talked about sex dolls before. Let's talk more on that one. Do you have any more insight as to the kind of future of sex, the sex marketplace, let's call it?
Yeah, so in my presentation for the International Conference for Men's Issues, I had a slide of my presentation called Uncanny Vulvas and Striking Vipers, which is kind of a play on the Black Mirror episode Striking Vipers, which is about kind of immersive virtual reality technology that's used in a sexual way. It's very, very interesting. Probably shouldn't say with spoilers, but essentially two male friends have this immersive virtual reality technology, and one of them adopts a kind of female avatar, and they end up kind of having sex and all the kind of psychological implications of that. In terms of the future of VR and sex robots, I'm not an expert, but my intuition is that the VR, the virtual reality software, will get there faster than really high quality sex robots, in my opinion, to kind of mainstream that. So I think we could expect that. There's an evolutionary psychologist called Diana Fleischman, and she has a brilliant article called Uncanny Vulvas, a play on the Uncanny Valley term, about kind of when sex robots or when AI will become kind of they will pass that point of, you know, where we recognize them as realistic. So Diana talks about how evolutionary psychology can give us insight into how sex robots are going to develop and have ramifications on society. And she says that future robots will have all the allure and the cues of fertility in a flesh and blood woman, combined with the artificial intelligence that creates a compulsive reward-directed behavior. Pornography and prostitution are popular because they arrive at sexual end goals or a reasonable facsimile with more clarity and lower cost than the mating market. When men get cues that women are interested in them, even if those cues or those women are just representations on a screen, or you know, kind of representations through a robot, our evolved psychology leads us to take less risky ways of attempting to achieve reproductive success. So the cues that you would get from the evolved psychology, if you're interacting with a sexual VR or a sexual robot, could be called something like fake fitness. So the messages you're receiving from your environment is that you're doing great from an evolutionary point of view. Stay home all day in your room with your sex robot, or stay home all day with your virtual reality, because you're an evolutionary dynamite. You're getting all this sexual success. So I mentioned before that this could be the kind of pacifying effect, and it might lead to the higher quality and more kind of convincing this technology gets. It might lead to people retreating from the real world mating market. And like you say, Elizabeth, I'm optimistic of this technology being used as an addition to valuable human relationships. But also there is a fear that it might lead to a retreat from engaging with other humans at all. You know, why take the risk when you can achieve great success at home?
Especially when the risks are becoming so significant.
Right. Yeah.
You know, in very real kind of losing your job, losing your liberty ways.
I agree.
I'm coming back to man's need for psychodrama. You know, it's like they can kind of come up with better fulfillments in your head, you know, for just kind of consuming this sort of thing, and maybe somehow potentially responding to their own value system. And there is, yeah, I do admit to the concern that, you know, the rest of the world might be kind of forgotten. So what is the way to go about this? Should we just kind of just have more conversations about it and be sure we have our feet on the real world, well grounded, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, after a while, it will become difficult to know. You'll detach your sense of reality from the reality you get in the immersive world. It will become so immersive that you wouldn't even know, you might even forget that you're in a virtual. Who's to say we're not in one right now? So I have a question for you, both, actually, if I could follow up. What do you think about that idea I spoke about the line of taboo being kind of narrowed down so much now, because every kind of sexuality has become, sexual expression has become so normalized that to access that taboo excitement, you have to go to darker and darker places.
Well,
what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's directly in line with what I said earlier about the opposite side of the puritanical. It's like, the more is exposed and the more the taboo is, shifted towards that way, and that need to kind of fulfill the psychodrama of crossing that line, it kind of becomes mutated in what I think is a potentially dangerous way, perhaps. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think that idea of expressing what is within you is very important. There's a biblical quote, I think it's Matthew, don't quote me on it, that says, "Bring forth that which is within you, and that which you bring forth will save you. But if you do not bring forth that which is within you, what remains within you will destroy you." So it talks about, and I don't necessarily think that means you have to be a talker or a communicator or kind of talk about your feelings, but I think you have to contend with them and integrate them into your life. And I think the same is kind of true perhaps sexually. You find when people suppress and repress that it manifests in different ways unexpectedly.
Right. So it's probably worth it for men to start admitting that they have sexual value, deal with them more openly, I suppose, because I think a lot of them kind of think of themselves as either sinful or we're not worthy of the goddess's sexual attention or something like that. So the lack of esteem in themselves, and they kind of they feel like they have to go a dangerous route or a sinful route to attain something, instead of being more honest, even feeling a bit virtuous about the fact that they're caring for their own sexual values and attaining them.
Right, and I've found in my experience from talking to male friends and female friends such a difference in the way we talk about sex, and that's not necessarily surprising, but I find that men are very happy and comfortable talking to their friends about sexuality in terms of what they like visually, what kind of look they like, or what a woman looked like in bed, whereas they're very reluctant to talk about what happens when the door is closed, and how the kind of performance element. And I suppose a lot of that is because so much pressure is put on men in terms of sexual performance. I mean, we hear all the time about the unrealistic body image from pornography for women, but when is the last time you've watched a porn video that isn't with a 10-inch penis that's definitely going to be circumcised? So in terms of body image, what messages are we sending to men there?
Yeah, well, that might be true in like more Western pornography, but when it comes to Japanese pornography, it's almost the opposite, actually. It's like they use purposefully kind of schmucky, kind of average-looking guys, and the idea is to make the viewer feel better about themselves.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, I don't like the fact that they're, that it's always these schmucky guys. That's kind of in its own way a bit of a commentary on men, but I thought it was worth noting.
That's interesting because, without getting too graphic or anything,
right,
the pornography I would like to watch is kind of aspirational. I would prefer the kind of more aspirational guy to be the star, rather than to feel better about myself. I don't know if it would make me feel better about myself to see someone not so aspirational.
Elizabeth, pass it on to you.
Yeah, so according to this Pagan Meditations book I've been reading, she kind of touches on the idea that the reason we're sort of, like you say, the taboos are being pushed back, and more kind of extreme and dark kind of boundaries are being pushed is because we lack the kind of spiritual aspect. And it, you know, it also kind of is related to the whole immersive technology thing as well. You know, it's like if what we are seeking is the most extreme kind of acts in a very mechanical way, then, you know, robots are the way to go, because nobody's going to get hurt. That's absolutely true. But, you know, what we are not ever going to be able to achieve with technology is a spiritual, soulful connection. But, you know, how many of us are achieving that with our sexual partners anyway?
That's right. And actually, you could make the argument that to convince someone of a spiritual connection, and it's hard for me to draw the line between what constitutes a real spiritual moment or what constitutes convincing someone of a spiritual moment. You know, there are vehicles to access spiritual experiences like psychedelics and things like that. Now, or moments of awe can be kind of engineered. Perhaps the sheer power of information processing of a virtual reality robot or something like this might actually be so compelling in convincing you that it's given you exactly what you want in a way that would be far more powerful than even our evolutionary psychology telling us we've got the reward of a lifetime with a flesh and blood woman.
So I wonder if this balance can be attained. This, you know, this use of technology and virtuality, I suppose, for lack of a better term, could it be a part of? Can it be a healthy part of society in this future? If that balance is attained, can we see human interaction be restored? Assuming that it's kind of in decline, you know, and have these technological bonuses, you know, enhancing our lives and making things just richer all around.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you want to preserve is that cognitive niche that still gets you a reward for doing some of the work. The dystopian kind of vision of the techno future is the Disney movie WALL-E, right? You know, where you just see everybody is so pacified by technology doing everything for them that nobody could describe the world that's depicted in WALL-E, where everybody is, you know, fat as a fool and sitting on this kind of mobile chair, just drinking soda all day, completely pacified. Nobody could really claim that that's an aspirational future. So we want to try and preserve some of that cognitive niche that requires us to do some of the work. Now, I tend to be pretty optimistic about the potentiality of or potential of VR technology in general. So I'm probably a bit of more of an idealist there rather than I'm not a Luddite for sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I share your optimism for technology and the future, because, you know, I'm not one of those anti-technology guys. Now, I know there's problems. I know there's like surveillance and you know, and like data collection. There's like a lot of you know, shady stuff happening, but I don't want that to judge it by those common denominators. I want it to judge it for what it could be.
Yes.
Right. And I don't like to think that technology is this unnatural thing. Rather, I think I have an unusual view in that technology is about making things more natural than nature itself.
Right.
Right. Because I'm a bit of a tangent here, but I'm a huge Frank Lloyd Wright fan. Right. You know, the architect.
I'm not aware of him. No.
Really?
Great things. Houses and stuff, homes.
Right. Yeah, houses, museums, office buildings. Like.
Have you seen North by Northwest? Because there's a building there by him.
Right. Well, more to the point about Frank Lloyd Wright is that he makes well, in particular, his prairie-style buildings, it's like they aren't in contrast to the nature that it's built on, to the environment that it's built on, right? It's almost like a part of nature. It's like, like you didn't have to like lop off a part of the mountain to create it. It's like something that grew out of that,
Yes.
Right. So that's exactly what I mean by more natural than nature. It's like, it's artificial, but it's obeying nature's rules.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
that's actually similar to myself, where I would kind of be unusual in that I'm evolutionary psychologist kind of based, but also a big believer in kind of transhumanism and this kind of upward trajectory of kind of gaining dominion over nature, which seems to be
Right.
kind of a goal.
Right.
Interestingly, I was lucky enough to meet Jordan Peterson at an event of his. I got a nice present of the VIP ticket, so I got to actually have a 40-minute conversation with him and maybe 5 other people, which was really cool. It was so interesting. And I asked him the question, because he often talks about how heaven won't arrive on its own on earth, and that it's our duty as individuals to tilt the world towards heaven or hell in every interaction and every action we take, or every even thought we take. He says that that's the kind of battleground that we're on, that's the arena that we're on. So I reminded him of his words on that and asked him, with that in mind, and with the kind of upward trajectory of technological development, would he consider himself a transhumanist, and whether that's the eternal kind of human project that we seem to be developing with maybe a goal of, for the first time in our history, putting our hands on the wheel of evolution. And I often make the joke that if Mother Nature was a real person, she might be put in jail for abuse at times, right? Nature is often cruel and very slow in terms of development. Now we're in a unique position on a precipice to kind of exponentially accelerate that growth. And, that's such a unique time. So his answer was that that I've given him a lot to think about, but it would very much depend on the definition of transhumanist that was used, and how those ends are reached was his gripe. But he said I'd given him a lot to think about, which was the best birthday ever.
That's great. Yeah, because on transhumanism, it's like I have a similar view with what I said about the technology and the Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. Like, if transhumanism is about making you more human than human instead of less human, then I'm all for it.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, things like IVF babies, or things like that, or someone with a bionic leg, you don't see them as less human. That's not the way you quantify their humanity. There was all sorts of fears that IVF babies would be born defect and they wouldn't have souls. And for all intents and purposes, it seems to me like my friends who've been born through IVF seem as full of, they've got soul.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to bring it back to the evolutionary psychology, I think that the technological and political developments have really freed us to behave naturally. And you see that in like the Norwegian gender paradox, don't you?
Yes.
Where people, they have poured so much energy into trying to rectify gender imbalances, but because people aren't worried about survival, they do what they want, and what most men and women want, or a significant enough proportion, is very much sex typical.
Right.
And the other thing that you two reminded me of was a book by James Hillman called The Force of Character, which is a really great book to get for anyone who's getting on in years, because he argues that our aging, the fact that we're living past 30, 5 or whatever is not an accident of civilization. It's
Mhm.
by design, and that, you know, these are the ages that we are supposed to live to. You know, we just have to work out how. And the reasons he gives are, you know, that it takes us that long to become authentically ourselves. And
Right.
you know, part of that for him is the weakening of the sexual urge, which frees us to stop pursuing sexual partners and live in ourselves authentically, kind of pursuing more noble goals.
Right. Interesting.
Which
Yeah.
I think is a really lovely idea, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love James Hillman. Like Pierre Wright introduced me to him, and I'm just
Same.
yeah, insight after insight of absolute gold in my mind.
Great. I'm going to have to ask you all for a list of all the things you've recommended from this episode, because there's been quite a lot.
Right,
Your
right.
recommendations down.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Something you said reminded me of something there. Yeah, so is that idea, the Hillman idea, Elizabeth, is that like that surviving is an engineering problem for humanity? You know, that the body's decline is just kind of an engineering problem that we need to figure out. Yeah, that's fascinating.
In terms of the body, definitely. Yeah, I'm thinking about the spirit. I hope it's done in tandem with the body.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was also really refreshing for me to read that book, because I think that we live in a society now that really denigrates age, and that's been particularly true since, you know, in the UK we had the Brexit vote, and older people, you know, were more likely to vote for Brexit. So we had all these articles and, you know, people on Twitter saying like, oh, if only they'd just have died before the vote and stuff like that, you know, and how stupid and bigoted old people are. And I absolutely disagree, you know, and I mean, that's a sort of idea that's been gaining currency since the 60s. You know, one of my favorite songs, my victory song, in fact, is one called Volunteers by Jefferson Airplane. And I listened to it after the Brexit result was announced, and, you know, I listened to it after Donald Trump was elected, POTUS, and it's a great song. It's like, look what's happening out on the streets, got a revolution. But there's one lyric in it, which is, one generation's got old, one generation's got soul. And I think they've, you know, in that lyric, I think that's exactly wrong.
Right. Okay. Like back to James Hillman, because he's the guy that, you know, spoke about what is called the puer archetype. That's kind of like the inner boy inside you, right? So in the context of old people, you know, it's like, you know, who is to say that, you know, old people have less value than us youthful people, because, you know, they might to varying degrees have that puer still alive and well inside them, you know. And so
I think anyone with a granddad with a train set could attest to that.
Yeah. What you said got me interesting about the kind of the denigration of the older generation, and it's actually a kind of it's like a political way of viewing the world, that we'll actually there are two kind of types of people. There are ones that are kind of morally sure of themselves and think that we can arrive at a utopia that's fixed in place. But there's an Oscar Wilde quote about utopia being a place at which you arrive and instantly set off from in search of a better utopia. You never actually get there, and that's the point. It's the possibility of all brilliant possible futures. It's constantly in flux. So there's a type of people maybe who see moral certainty, and they're embarrassed about the sins of our past. Whereas I take the position that I hope that I'll have been wrong about a lot of things in the future, right? And I think is it Nietzsche that says wisdom wouldn't be so valuable if we weren't so embarrassed about what we had to do along the way to get it.
Sure.
And you know, that's kind of very much in line with the way I think is we're doomed to be embarrassed about the mistakes of our ancestors, but that it's a constant journey. It's dynamic. It's in flux. You never arrive at utopia. You immediately set off.
I want to comment on that. It's like this asymptotic drive towards that utopian ideal. You know, I'm reminded of, you know, the journey is the thing, happiness is the road. It's like what that consists of is like creating, this is kind of like on the Jordan Peterson idea of trying to make your heaven on earth and kind of tilting it towards that. It's like, you know, you have to make your own utopias on earth, tangible little utopias, like, you know, like vestiges and, you know, aspects of it, and integrate it to your life as a sort of kind of balance, you know, of being grounded in the real world while, you know, aiming for that. You know, it's such a masculine idea, just aiming for that thing, you know, with intent to kind of grab it in some way or another, you know, but actually it's more of an expression of the masculine feminine dynamic. I think it's like the femininity kind of, you know, keeps one grounded, but the masculine is still going to keep on aiming for it. So whichever, kind of like in that interplay, we have the real world, like, and we have nature even. So I don't like it when some people say that nature is just femininity. You know, I think nature is masculine and femininity having encountered one another and brought us this kind of real world, this planet, this cosmos that we've got right now. And, you know, it's not static, it's still going on. You know, we're still spinning in space. And, you know,
totally agree. Yeah. I've got the proper Oscar Wilde quote now, because I think I butchered it, but he famously wrote that a map of the world that does not include utopia is not worth glancing at, for it leaves out the one country at which humanity is always landing. And when humanity lands there, it looks out, and seeing a better country, sets sail. Progress is the realization of utopias. So I think that's just beautifully put. About how it can kind of see utopia in a different light.
Exactly. We do need that balance. It's like, you know, I think some in the more, you know, hard religious side might always yearn for that utopia, but won't find it so much in the real world that they become kind of unhappy and think everything is sinful and against the word of God or something like that. And then there's the other extreme that completely disbelieves in the idea of utopia and kind of, you know, expresses itself in like self-degradation, kind of like letting yourself kind of go and letting the world kind of go, sending it to hell in a handbasket, kind of an idea. So I keep repeating this. We need that balance. Absolutely,
yeah. And for anybody in your audience who might need a kind of a more optimistic boost to get believing in a utopian vision again, I don't know if either of you have listened to Nick Bostrom's Letter from Utopia. So it's a great written document, but he has a YouTube video of him reading it in his own voice, and it's a letter back to our current selves from a future utopia reached, and it's so inspiring. I can't recommend it enough.
All right, thank you.
Sounds good.
William, where can the audience find you?
Okay, so yeah, I'm in the process of actually building. We're trying to design a website, which is not my forte at all, but hopefully soon that will be built, and all my videos, interviews, written work, and everything can be housed in the one place. Until then, it's probably best to just go to my Twitter, which is @CostelloWilliam, and you can find most of my stuff and my hot takes on all the issues of our time.
Right. All right, thank you for that. And Elizabeth, anything else you want to add to that?
No, that's all good. But I would recommend following William on Twitter. Absolutely, it's a great feed you've got going on there.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth.
All right, well, I guess that's it for this interview. Thank you, William, and thanks, Elizabeth, for joining me on this one.
Thanks, Vernon.